pre-test quiz to assess your knowledge with regard to crystallization. I'm going to give you a second to fill that out.
Oh, so
All these lines?
just blind, huh?
All those lines, Eddie. You do not need to complete all of the lines.
Can we use
You don't have
pictures?
anything to add. From what I understand, you prefer to dance. Although I haven't had an opportunity to see that
Anybody
yet.
have any ideas?
It's just as well.
And if you don't have any knowledge, then that's fine. You're welcome to put your name on it, return it blank. It's obviously not for any points or for any credit. We are all supposed to do some type of a measurable, so this is my measurable. And we'll start off with that, and then we'll proceed into what crystallization is.
You like mine.
Okay, thank you.
And mine.
I like that. That is,
And we could just really
You
just
have
kind of
them,
make
Dazzle?
stuff up, right?
No, but I
Because we're
want-
not supposed to know this.
my
You like
daughter
that?
does as well.
I put bedazzling and qualitative research.
Which I think if you're doing a pistache or, some type of a collage might be in order.
I attempted to draw a crystal myself.
Okay.
I'm applying the previous,
Like Superman style?
like crystal.
Kryptonite.
Like
Yeah, like
Breaking
green.
Bad style.
Yeah, crystal. Like. I've been in it. Eddie's, taking this seriously. I have no idea. Some people are taking, I have no idea. Yes.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here you go, Jason.
You want to show yours and put yours in the camera there, David?
No, that's right.
I think you should, you put each one individually in front of the camera.
All right, I think that those will be maybe even more humorous at the end. So
Find out what it is.
I'll read them to you before you take the post test. All
Oh,
right.
no, there's a post test.
So today we're gonna, you're the assessment gal. Pre-test, post test.
Pre-test, post test.
You bet.
You're gonna demonstrate knowledge. I wanna know what your learning outcome is.
Well, today we're going to be learning about crystallization.
There you go.
And I had the opportunity to engage in a little bit of personal correspondence with Dr. Ellingson, and was really, really enamored, I think, with the book and with the approach to qualitative research. She is a former University of Vermont debater, and had some communication training in the Mid-American Conference. I got my master's degree at Ball State University, and she got her master's degree at Northern Illinois University. So we ran around in much of the same circles, unbeknownst to me, and I was just kind of randomly assigned the book. She did most of that running around in those circles 3 or 4 years before I started running around in those circles. So we constantly kind of missed each other in those various different positionalities. Crystallization is a method of looking at the same data through multiple different lenses. So there's a lot of inherent connections into what Dora and Eddie just discussed and just spoke with us about. It is essentially you look at the data and you allow the data to kind of come in through that prism, and then it refracts back out in various different ways. So we're going to be checking that out. One of the things that Dr. Ellingson is very clear about, though, is that her approach to crystallization is by no means a prescriptive, this is how you do it type of approach, and that's why the title of the book is An Introduction. In all of the correspondence, I was kind of like, well, what would you think about this methodology? And she would kind of push back and say, well, once again, it's not, a totality, this is what you can do with it. It's just really kind of just a starting point. So we'll explore that starting point. One of the things that she's also clear about is that she does not look at this method or this methodology as being a form of triangulation. Rather, instead, it is actually kind of a criticism of triangulation. So just to review very quickly, triangulation is a quantitative method which includes closed surveys, test scores, temperature, age, scale variables. Qualitative methods, open-ended surveys, interviews, ethnographies, participatory observation, etc. And then a triangulated method would be something like I'm probably going to learn about in the mixed methods class, which is both open and closed survey questions. And you're kind of triangulating all of those things for a better, in quotation marks, truth claim. So she's very clear, Dr. Ellingson is very clear that crystallization is not triangulation. What crystallization is looking at a single data set and filtering that through a prism and coming up with various different ways to represent that particular data. We're going to talk about two different specific forms of crystallization here towards the end of the presentation, integrative and dendritic crystallization. So a couple of definitions taken directly from the text on page 4. Crystallization combines multiple forms of analysis and multiple genres of representation into a coherent text or a series of related texts, building a rich and openly partial account of a phenomenon that problematizes its own construction, highlights researchers' vulnerabilities and positionality, makes claims about socially constructed meanings, and reveals the indeterminacy of knowledge claims even as it makes them. So, if you're like me, you were like, hey, where are the breadcrumbs? This sounds an awful lot like when we used to read Burns books in Dr. Wenger's class. So let's break that definition down. And in particular, what I'm going to direct your attention to are to the bold-faced words and to the words that are in different topologies. So we have combines. You are effectively taking more than one method. We're going to look at an example a little bit later, and I've set up an email to send to each of you a copy of an article produced by Dr. Ellingson. And it was an article that she produced about the different practitioners in a healthcare setting and essentially turning their qualitative interviews into forms of poetry. And that was an article that got, despite its experimental nature, was published in the Journal of Health Communication, which in our communication discipline, there are specific researchers, and that's really all they look at is healthcare communication and how doctors and nurses communicate healthcare situations. And she published, it is one of the most respected journals in that particular area, and it is all about taking those interviews and turning them essentially into poetry. So it combines that interview and then looks for the poetry within it, and basically comes up with a multiple analysis through multiple genres. Many of the things that Ed and Dora just talked to us about, using photographs, using drawing, using ethnography. Those are essentially what she would refer to as a genre. And also interesting within her training was prior to becoming a debate coach, after she was in debate, she left and went to a private liberal arts college in New England and got a master's degree in creative writing. So she very much places an emphasis on the auto part of that auto ethnography and of making a lot of use of poetic license as you put together your ethnographies. Building a rich and openly partial, and a big part of this is your positionality. You certainly bring several things to that research study. You bring several things to that research question. She encourages you to be openly partial about what it is that you bring to that. Be openly partial about both your strengths and your weaknesses. Obviously, from the last presentation and from getting an opportunity to know Dora over the course of the last couple of years, we all know that she has a tremendous amount of musical ability. She's very musically gifted. That would be an example of being openly partial about your strengths. Highlights the researcher's vulnerabilities and positionality. What are you good at, what are you bad at, and reveals the indeterminacy of knowledge claims even as it makes them. So it reveals the fact that this is not a capital T with a timeout sort of T truth that objectivists or positivists would hope to generalize about. It's much more of a small case, lower dimension sort of truth. And it's positional and it's indeterminate. The truth may be constructed by that research subject or by that participant one way if they're interviewed about it. It may be constructed a completely different way if they're given an opportunity to take photographs from their life about it, and yet constructed even a different way if you look at their interview data and then kind of look for the poetry within that interview data. Still yet another way, when the researcher looks at the totality of all of those different things and maybe writes a song about it, or uses a cool new iPad application called Songify to put their data into that and produce an electronic sort of version of what some of the key themes within that coded data are. In addition to that, crystallization's reason involves bringing together multiple contrasting, even conflicting ways of knowing in order to make knowledge claims and to problematize those same claims. So if we look at the truth from the healthcare practitioner's point of view, this is a difficult patient. If we look at the truth from the other patients who are in treatment with that particular person, this is a person who stands up for the rest of us. We all look to that person, for leadership in this healthcare situation. So what is the truth about that one particular patient? Are they a difficult patient to work with? Are they, quote, hard to stick? Do they give everybody a hard time? Or are they actually a leader as far as those patients are concerned? The indeterminacy and the problematization of those knowledge claims is what's absolutely critical and fundamental to integrated or, in fact, dendritic crystallization. So I won't belabor this slide too long. I really feel like we had an opportunity to cover a lot of that ground, and I think that Ed and Dory did a great job. I would go ahead and just kind of come down here to the mixed media text. And one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting about multimedia, sort of mixed media text, is the opportunity to use hypertextual documents and the opportunity to use web pages to make truth claims and to problematize those same truth claims. So what you might end up doing is having a data set that you get published in a journal, and then you go and construct a website in addition to that. What you'll find is what many of us who have published in a journal before have found, and that is that 7 or 8 really dedicated, loyal followers talked to us about it at a conference, and that was really about it. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of impact per se. And if you look at the impact outside of your specific discipline, in my specific discipline, most researchers are waiting their entire life to get published in this journal called the Quarterly Journal of Speech. And as far as impact analysis goes, at Tier 1 research institutions, if you're a communication scholar, you produce something that's published in the Quarterly Journal of Speech, you put that together with almost 2 other publications from anywhere, and you're going to get tenure. It's that prestigious, it's that kind of looked at. If you produce something that's in the Quarterly Journal of Speech, I can guarantee you that no one is going to recognize you at Homeland. Okay, no one's going to look at you at Crest and go, wow, that's the guy who got published in QJS last month. It's not going to happen. And that's kind of what they refer to when they talk about impact of your research and of your scholarship, versus you produce a skit, and the skit is performed at a local university. There is a dance troupe that gets recruited to perform some of that stuff as a performative dance. You cooperate with minstrels, and those minstrels come together and produce a soundtrack that kind of goes with all of that different stuff. Next thing you know, the impact of what you have done is diffused to a much larger audience. And you wind up on YouTube, you get millions of hits, and the next thing you know, you're being asked to speak at additional conferences and things like that. More people might be interested in purchasing a book because you've used performativity, because you've used multimedia text to kind of get the word out. This is part and parcel back with this openly partial part, openly partial. Dr. Ellingson very much calls upon each of us. You're either, and I think this is kind of from debate, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And as a person who is able to marshal words, as a person who is able to marshal data, as a person who is able to marshal arguments, you are either going to contribute to the solving of society's problems, or you're going to endorse the status quo. And that endorsing of the status quo makes you complicit in those injustices that you are not confronting. So you have an obligation with these data sets, and you have an obligation with those research questions that you're asking and answering, to ask questions that aren't going to harm society, and to follow up on those questions and make sure that you're doing something positive with that data. So this is kind of a blast from the past. We all saw this slide several times in our 6853 class. What I wanted to point out about this was I thought that it was really interesting that Drs. Carney and Moore adapted from Guba and Lincoln, very much positioned the post-positivists with the positivists. Dr. Ellingson definitely does not. She thinks that the post-positivists are different, essentially, than the positivists. The post-positivists at least acknowledge the indeterminacy of any kind of objectivist sort of truth claim. So her diagram, which it was really difficult to construct, she does a great job with words, but the visuals were really not what I had hoped they would be. I'm a very visual person, and the text was incredibly dense. I distilled most of what I read over the course of 200 or so pages about epistemology down into this slide. And she essentially says that there's 3 essential schools of thought with regard to ontology, and that she is here at the left with radical interpretivism. And radical interpretivism essentially believes that truth claims are subjectivist, and it contributes to things like performance art, films, poetry, narratives, and fiction. You may see kind of a wash on the top of this ontology diagram, and what that is supposed to represent is the ontologies that are best covered by this paradigm. And you see that it kind of begins to break down right over here, right before objectivist, experimental, manipulative, realism, and positivism start. Now, if you're going to engage in a true mixed method, sort of study, you may wind up with some data from over here and some data from over here. But it's really rare that you go out and conduct an ANOVA and do a bunch of regression analysis, and then you conduct it from this position, and you get something published in quarterly journal, speech, or something like that, and then you turn around and do a big performance art piece down at the local VFW. That's probably not going to happen a whole lot. So she says that people who fall really into this, and they are not willing to kind of come over into the social constructivism, or at least into the post-positivist paradigm, really do struggle with crystallization as a method. So for the most part, it really works well with these 2 ontologies. She argues that she's not going to replace a totalist, kind of ontology that consists of 4 categories or 5 categories with 3 categories. That's just how she looks at it. It might be important to note also that this all comes from a postmodern feminist perspective, and the work of Laurel Richardson, who writes very much about performativity and performance-based deconstruction of power relationships, is really inherent within all of this crystallization research. So it emphasizes creative forms of representation, and I'm not going to really belabor all of this a whole lot because I think that Ed and Dora already did a really good job explaining all of these various different genres. I'd instead like to focus specifically on the genre that I would like to explore with you today, and that is the genre of poetry. I consider myself to be somewhat of a poet. I've been actively constructing poetry since I was around 9 years old. My daughter also very much enjoys constructing poetry. I love reading her poems and helping her out with that. She's a very talented young girl. Use existing interviews, compress the non-essential from the salient bit, find a refrain, look for a rhythm and drama. Find the poetry in the interview that you've already conducted. And I'll go ahead and show you kind of what some of the rest of this looks like. Performances. You have the data to represent in whatever format the journal wants it. Now go act out a skit, cooperate with a dance troupe or a theater company or minstrels to perform your own truth, as contested as that might be. So, what I'd like to do now is distribute some famous quotations with regard to poetry and what poetry is. Obviously, it's not a creative writing class, but for those of us who are firmly rooted in the arts and in the arts part of the arts and sciences, this shouldn't be too far from home base. Yeah, you feel right at home, that's for sure. Fair enough. The 4th one there I thought was really interesting by Carl Sandburg. Poetry is an echo asking a shadow to dance. The next one there by Edgar Allan Poe, couple down. Poetry is the rhythmical creation of beauty in words. And then a few more down from there. Poetry is nearer to vital truth than history from Plato. And then the very next one, poetry is the art of uniting pleasure with truth. And then the very last one, poetry is all that is worth remembering in life. So I have a couple of things written out there for you, kind of some prescriptions that go along with some of those quotations. The prescriptions that I've listed there for you are listed in bold type. I'm going to distribute another document to you here. You are not obligated to read this, but you might want to take a look at it at some other point in your copious amounts of free time. What I'm distributing to you now is Dr. Ellingson's brief section on poetic method. And you'll see there in the front and the back where she talks a little bit about poetry and poetic transcription. And then there's an example really of kind of what that looks like on the back. And there on page 64 down to page 65, which I pasted to the bottom to save trees. Let's look at that quotation there. Everybody would treat wrong. It took me a week or so until I figured him out. Give him a bad time, argue with him, and it makes him happy. That's him. You've got to be, I hate to say it, to him it's not disrespectful, but you've got to be kind of disrespectful to him and speak to him basically in his own language in order for him to be happy. And he has to complain to be happy, ha ha. Which Dr. Ellingson turned into a poem. It took me a week or so until I figured him out. Giving him a bad time, argue with him, and it makes him happy. That's him. I hate to say it, you got to be kind of like disrespectful towards him and speak to him in his own language in order for him to be happy. And he has to complain to be happy. So you have essentially there an instance where she took a small bit of ethnographic interview data and then essentially turned that into a poem. Now, one of the things that I kind of pushed back on her about, sort of back and forth in our dialogue, was whether or not it was acceptable to just kind of compress some of those words out. If you'll notice, really what she's done, there's very few actual omissions. She's just kind of cleaning up sort of a missed speech, uhs and ums and things like that. And once again, she kind of defaulted back to, this is just an introduction, you're free to do it however you want. In debate, we'll very much participate in a practice called underlining cards. And what we would do is we would find maybe 5 or 6 snippets of text that kind of make the argument that we wanted to make. We'll take that first sentence out of the top, we'll take the last sentence of the first paragraph, we'll take the middle sentence of the second paragraph, we'll take the fourth sentence of the third paragraph, and then we'll conclude and read the entirety of the bottom paragraph. And essentially what you do is, through the omission of context, construct something that is more performative and that has more utility in a debate round. And we kind of talked about that process, and she said that while that was not how she typically produced her poems, that was an acceptable methodological way to engage in this type of poetry construction from your interviews. So what I would like to do is follow the example here provided for you by Dr. Ellingson on pages 64 and 65. And now I'm going to redistribute some artifacts that we've been working with over the course of this semester. These are the foster kid data. Now, Dr. Carney wanted me to make sure that all of you remembered that this data was to be kept confidential, and I'd very much appreciate it if you would return the 3 pages that you have randomly been given out of this one particular interview at the conclusion of tonight's class. I will, of course, make sure that all of those are shredded and that none of that is violating anyone's confidentiality. So, using the sheet here with the quotations and kind of the highlighted different things that I pointed out to you, look for drama. Look for instances where you feel like the person who is being interviewed has just released or just kind of opened up raw emotive state. And try to find those things within the interview. When you find that raw emotive state, remember that poetry is pretty much near to the truth. And you have an opportunity there to kind of look for the poetry in those words that you're looking at. Dr. Carney has been gracious enough to provide the words. These research participants were gracious enough to share their stories. Now all you have to do is sort of get out of the way and find the poetry.
Are you wanting us to write it out in a poetry form?
You're welcome to do that. What you might find is easier to do is go through and find kind of a poetic construction,
Okay.
and then maybe transcribe that back onto a piece of paper. As you can see from the example that I provided to you, that example was maybe only 30, 40, 50 words in length.
Okay.
So you're looking for the most salient, the most emotional, the most provocative 30 or 40 or 50 words that you found there in the 3 pages of the interview that you were randomly assigned.
I lost the third page.
This is the drawing that was associated with
And
this
do we
particular-
have any way of figuring out what order these pages go in?
The order in which they're given to you.
Well, I started at the very bottom, and I would say that it's an embrace of postmodern methods
Okay.
to not know.
What am I supposed to do? I forgot.
Not required.
Oh, this is their drawing.
Yeah. That one's a lot richer than the one that David and I were looking at. Ours was kind of just a stick figure. hopefully you found some poetry in what you were looking at there. Would anyone like to share what they found?
Sure.
I'll
do.
Well, it's interesting, there seemed to be a lot of pushback when I distributed it, and it looks like everybody found something. Pat, you want to start us off?
Yeah, this kid speaks in poetry.
Okay.
This is just what she said.
Is it the same person?
Yes.
Oh,
This is the
okay,
same
no
interview.
wonder we all found.
Home to you, this starts with home to you. Where is that now? Here in Oklahoma, this house I just got. My mom hates it when I say I'm going home and I'm not going back. I feel like that is a home, but it's not my home anymore.
That's powerful.
My sister and my brother, they are broken. Every time I go back, they are broken. And that's why I don't feel like it's a home anymore.
Very poetic. Thank you.
All her words, except for the very first one, which is Dr. Carney.
Wow.
Dora, would you like to share?
Sure. I was a freshman in high school. Why did he hit me? It happened very, very fast. It had happened before, but not like this. They wanted me to testify against my dad. I didn't want to, but if I didn't, I'd go to juvenile hall. And that's where I stopped.
Anyone else?
I'll do mine. Foster parents, it's not something you can really control. It's really hard to get people to care about kids that aren't their own. That's the part that bothers me the most, knowing we were paychecks to people. We didn't know our rights or that we had any. If you're a kid, you can be very rebellious and never have anything you say mean anything or to anyone. Or you can be good and hope for the best.
Ed?
Well, I don't have a car, as a lot of people have, but I ride a bike. And there are lots of people who ride bikes. It's normal, I guess. When I'm going to buy something, normally it's a necessity. Not something I want. It's just like toilet paper or something.
Or mine.
Go ahead, Bree.
The question that Dr. Carney asked was, okay, so tell me about your parents' perceptions on you attending college in Oklahoma. And what I got from it, when I first told them, they wouldn't listen. I was kidding. I started looking at Amtrak, finding a way to get there. Can't afford Amtrak. They realized I was leaving. They drove me down. It was perfect. I didn't go alone.
I didn't get it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It like started in the 5th grade. I never was athletic until that point. I gotta get better. I did that. I made it harder on myself. I feel like that was fun. Girl power.
Nice.
Cool.
Very cool.
Mine was just about the picture that we're having, and it's very poetic. I'm at the top of the mountain, getting through high school, the hardest thing. You get through all the obstacles. I thought it would be easy, but I have to go through the hard way. I always think the grass is greener, jumping through hoops, go through a fence, going around a fence, no grass, just dirt.
Ooh.
Very cool. Anybody else? All right. I think what the exercise illustrates is that after you get these data sets transcribed, depending on who the participant was and depending on what's present within the interview, there's a lot of opportunities to represent that data in a number of different modalities. I chose poetry because I've always had a very, sort of visceral connection to poetry. I've always kind of considered myself somewhat of a wordsmith. I have a poet on my MP3 player that I listen to a lot named Taylor Mowley. Some of you may be familiar with some of his work. Former elementary school teacher who got really involved in poetry slams and coaching poetry slam teams. And based on that involvement in coaching poetry slam teams, became an internationally recognized stand-up poet. And he is frequently called upon to universities to talk. I challenge any of you who have ever spent any time with a child or who have ever taught to listen to his poem, Tony Steinberg, 7th grade Viking warrior. And
What's his
get
name?
a little choked up. Taylor Mowley. He also wrote the poem, What Teachers Make, which has been widely circulated, one of the most circulated emails ever. So that guy. And I had an opportunity to listen to him speak a couple of years ago out at Deer Creek High School, and it was just a really rich experience for me. So essentially what I hope you get from this is that there's no limits associated with these types of representation of this data. Real quickly, you can have integrated, which is multiple forms of the representation of data in a large manuscript or a book or a performance, or you can have dendritic, and that is a dendrite and a neuron, which are obviously parts of your central nervous system. I thought that there was art in that image.
Looks like the Matrix.
It does, looks a lot like the Matrix. The electricity kind of pulsing through, the neurons. And I think that even those of you who don't consider yourselves in the class today to be poets, for about 10 minutes you put on that poetry hat. And I could tell based on how most of you wanted to share that you liked wearing it. So, dendritic crystallization is the crystallization of one data set over an extended period of time. So you might have one data set where it's just the ethnography that gets published. You might have another data set where you turn that ethnography into poetry. You might have still another, sort of performance which gets posted to YouTube. Interesting example of that, I don't claim it to be original work, or I don't claim it to be an example of dendritic crystallization, but I used to teach the factors of keeping and gaining attention when I was teaching developmental English. And one of the things that I talked about was starting your essay off on a positive note. And the example that I used was familiarity and repetition in the song by the Flowbots, I Can Ride My Bike with No Handlebars. And I thought that was a really cool way to kind of access some of that material. Well, one of my really close friends that I went through my undergraduate program with happens to run one of the most successful dance studios in the South. And I sent her the link to this video. She's kind of funny because we listen to different kinds of music. So she will always email me and say, hey, what are you listening to? What's cool now? I'm putting together some dance numbers. Well, I sent her the video for that particular song, and her entire dance company did this crazy choreographed out deal for it. And I went to visit them and went to their recital, and they performed it, and I was very moved. So I think that the opportunity for presenting this scholarship in really different ways, kind of getting outside of your comfort zone, opens up a lot of possibilities to you, and it opens up a lot of possibilities for the data. And if you do take up Dr. Ellingson's challenge to confront those oppressions and those power differences and the things that you see as being wrong with society in your research agenda, I think performativity is a really interesting way to do that. Thank you.